Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Macbeth Explained Annotate With Me series. In today's video, I will be looking at Act 4, Scene 1. It's quite a long scene, as you can tell from the length of it. It's quite a long scene, but about half of it is mostly just the witches making spells. And so a lot of this scene actually doesn't need much analysis and will absolutely not be used as part of essay writing for any of the key characters. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be reading over the whole scene as usual and only annotating key parts, but also sort of explaining to you which bits are relevant and which bits are not relevant, as I usually do. So if you'd like to pause the video, go grab your copy of the text if you need any pens or anything else that you might need, and press play when you're ready. So Act 4 is the scene where Macbeth goes back to the witches, and it's the scene where Macbeth gets his second and final set of prophecies, and as such it's another pivotal moment in the play. Of course, we already have had our anticipation built for this scene because we were there in the feast scene. We know that Macbeth has been intending to go see the witches. We had the scene with Hecate where she talks about planning, more or less planning Macbeth's downfall, and so as the audience we're very much anticipating this scene, the return of the witches. So Act 4, Scene 1, a cavern in the middle, a boiling cauldron. So this is where the witches are meeting. They're sort of meeting in a type of cave. There's a boiling cauldron in the middle. They're making spells. Thunder, enter the three witches. I'll be reading pretty much through this opening section just because they're just reciting almost like a type of chant or incantation. They're just making spells. So a lot of it is not so much nonsensical, but it's just sort of more there for entertainment purposes than storytelling or characterization purposes. So the first witch says, "Thrice the brinded cat hath mewed, thrice and once the hedge pig whined. Harp your Christ, 'tis time, 'tis time." So they've been waiting for these signs that it's time to do the spell, like hearing animals make certain noises at certain times, and now it's time for the spell. "Round about the cauldron go, in the poison entrails throw, toad that under cold stone days and nights has 31 sweltered venom sleeping got, boil thou first in the charmed pot." So they're throwing in their ingredients, and their ingredients include poison entrails, like guts of animals, like toads. All of them chant together, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Second witch says, "Fillet of a fenny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake, eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog." So these are all, of course, ingredients in their spell. "Adder's fork and blindworm's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble." All of them again chant, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. The third witch says, "Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, moor and gulf, of the ravin salt sea shark, root of hemlock digged in the dark, liver of blaspheming Jew, gall of goat and slips of yew, silvered in the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. Make the gruel thick and slab. Add thereto a tiger's children for the ingredients of our cauldron." So they're throwing in more ingredients, and these ingredients include plants, like bits of animals, but also bits of people as well. Even the finger of a birth strangled babe, so the finger of a baby that died in childbirth. So quiet, sinister, grim ingredients. And again the chant, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Second witch says, "Cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good." And now they've added all their ingredients, they've done their chant, and the spell is ready. "Enter Hecate to the other three witches. Oh, well done. I commend your pains, and everyone shall share in the gains." So when she says everyone shall share in the gains, she's saying that whatever the results of the spell that they've just done, and of course we know this spell is going to be about Macbeth and about sort of bringing about his downfall, she's saying everyone will share in the gains. We're all going to benefit from this spell. And so what she's implying here is that the witches are actually somehow going to benefit from whatever's going to happen to Macbeth, and if they're just benefiting from watching his downfall, or because of what the outcome of what's going to happen in the country, that's sort of unclear. She then carries on to say, and now about the cauldron sing, like elves and fairies in a ring, enchanting all that you put in. And then she leaves. Music and a song, Black Spirits, Hecate retires. And so Hecate leaves, and this is the final time that she's going to be seen in the play. And as you can tell from having followed this so far, Hecate only appears twice in the play. So that first time when she's sort of telling of the witches for not waiting for her, and this second time just now very quickly to tell them, all right, well done, the plan, everything's going according to plan. And there's actually a theory, a lot of people think that Hecate was not originally in the original Macbeth play, that she was actually added in later to the script by a different writer. And this could be because Hecate doesn't actually have any impact whatsoever in the text. And in fact, if you wrote a whole essay without really mentioning her, you would still be able to access top marks. She's not really an important character, and she's a character you could write a sort of grade 9 essay about without ever mentioning, even if you were talking about the supernatural. That's how little sort of impact she has on the text. So she's not really an important character to know about at all. The second witch, after Hecate leaves, says, by the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks. And here when she says something wicked this way comes, this is another very iconic quote from Macbeth, very famous quote. She's referring, of course, to Macbeth, who has arrived to come see the witches, as we knew he would. But it's really interesting to look at the language that the witches use to talk about Macbeth. They call him something wicked, something evil. And the word something really dehumanizes Macbeth. You know, not someone wicked, something wicked, like almost he's a thing and not a person. And it really shows us the witches' attitude towards Macbeth, this sort of lack of respect and maybe even downright hatred for him. And they call him wicked, which means evil. And if the witches think that Macbeth is evil, that's sort of saying a lot, given that the witches would literally be sort of servants of darkness and evil. So something wicked this way comes. They tell Macbeth to come in, and to Macbeth. This is how Macbeth greets them. How now, you secret, black and midnight hags? What is it you do? So he immediately questions them, and he immediately greets them with insults. He calls them secret, black and midnight hags. And this insulting language really shows us the attitude that he has towards the witches. He does rely on them. And we know for a fact that he's literally come to them for a prophecy because he couldn't sort of cope without them. But he still doesn't like them or respect them. And he's very insulting towards them. And this also shows that he has a sort of sense of superiority over them, like he's better than them, which is ironic given the fact that he's quite literally seeking out their help. But of course, we also have the language, the words black and midnight, both references to darkness, both in the semantic field of darkness, and this motif of darkness is a recurring motif that keeps coming up in the play and usually is associated with Macbeth and the supernatural. So he is, regardless of his lack of respect or affection for them, he is linked to them. He can't help that. Whether he's linked to them, you know, consciously or subconsciously, his language always makes us, the audience, think of the witches. So he's asking them, he can see that they're, you know, going around the cauldron doing their thing, and he's saying, what is it you do? They all say to him, a deed without a name, something that we don't have a name for it. He says to them, I conjure you by that which you profess. However you come to know it, answer me. So immediately we have something that we've seen before, and that's Macbeth's use of imperatives when talking to the witches. And Macbeth doesn't really use a lot of imperatives, say, for example, with Lady Macbeth or other characters earlier on in the text, but he uses a lot of imperatives towards the witches, which again denotes this feeling of superiority over them, like he's better than them, that he can tell them what to do. And it also shows us how sort of misguided he is, because he really does see himself as being superior to the witches, but also while needing them and while relying on their prophecy. So it's a really sort of interesting way that we see Macbeth almost sort of try to hold on to some power anyway. Maybe he doesn't even realize how much he needs them. So then he goes on and he says, though you untie the winds and let them fight against the churches, though the yeasty waves confound and swallow navigation up, though bladed corn be lodged and trees blown down, though castles topple on their warders' heads, though palaces and pyramids do slope their heads to their foundations, though the treasure of nature's Germans tumble all together, even till destruction sicken, answer me to what I ask you. So here what he's saying, though, he's listing all of the things that he knows the witches can do. So he's talking about the fact that they can have control over the wind and, you know, blow churches down, and they have control over crops, and they have control over waves and water. So they have a lot of control over elements which they use destructively. Yeah, there's a lot of language of destruction. Swallow navigation up. Trees blown down, the castles are toppled, till destruction sickens. So this semantic field of destruction shows us that Macbeth is perfectly aware of the power of the witches, and yet still he's sort of ordering them around as if he feels that even in spite of the power that he knows they have, he can still control them. And this is all part of sort of Macbeth's kind of delusional relationship towards with the witches, where he doesn't even realize that he does realize that they're powerful, but he doesn't seem to realize the power they have over him, as if he's the exception. He gets to sort of order them around. So the witches don't really address this. They say to him, speak, demand, will answer. The first which say, if thou wouldst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters. And the witches have been really nice about this. They're saying, yep, go on, ask what you want to ask and we'll answer your questions. We can either answer you or our masters, whatever evil spirits they serve, can answer him. And they're being very accommodating here. But of course, as the audience, we have been privy to scenes that Macbeth hasn't, and we know that these witches are currently working towards his downfall. So we're watching this with a great sense of dramatic irony, because to Macbeth it feels like everything's according to plan. But we know for a fact it is going according to plan, just not his plan. So Macbeth says, call him, let me see him. Macbeth actually thinks, yes, go on, I want to see these spirits that you serve. And so what we're going to see here in this next part of the scene is the visions that the witches are going to call forth, and these visions are going to give Macbeth the new prophecies. Now, in the if you were writing about an essay and you wanted to write about these prophecies, you could mention the visions, or you could just mention the witches giving Macbeth these prophecies. It's basically the same thing. I wouldn't really mention specifically the visions unless you had a question that is very specifically about the supernatural, visions, hallucinations, something like that, because there's quite a lot of detail and there's a lot going on in the scene, and the most important part of the scene really is the prophecies and how they make Macbeth act and feel. So remember that when it comes to recalling events and writing about events, it's good to know in a lot of detail what happens in the text, but only ever mention the detail that you need to mention in your essays. So the first which says, pour in sow's blood that hath eaten her 9 farrow, grease that sweaten from the murderer's gibbet throw into the flame. So they're adding more ingredients into the fire. They're pouring in the blood of a female pig that's eaten her piglets, and the sweat of a murderer that was executed. Throw that into the flame. All of them sort of chant, come high or low, thyself an office deftly show. So they're summoning the apparitions. We hear thunder, first apparition. An apparition is a sort of like vision, like a ghostly vision. And the first apparition is an armed head. So a head presumably wearing armor, so maybe a head with a helmet. This first apparition almost certainly symbolizes Macbeth himself. Why? Because this sort of this head without a body reminds us both of Macbeth's first act in the play, which was to decapitate MacDonald, but also Macbeth's own ending, which he won't be aware of how he ends up at this point in the text. We don't know either, although we can sort of guess where his story is headed. But of course, later on, we do find out that this is how he meets his end. But it's important that what this apparition symbolizes because of the prophecy that it gives. So let's keep reading for a second. Macbeth tries to order it around. Tell me, that unknown power. The first which interrupts him. He knows thy thought. He knows what you're thinking. Hear his speech. but say thou not. Listen to what he says. You don't need to say anything. He already knows what you're thinking, which is important. We'll talk about this in a second. So the first apparition says, Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife. Dismiss me, enough. And it descends, it vanishes back down. And so the first sort of prophecy, the first warning Macbeth gets from the witches is beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife. So it's warning, the apparition is warning Macbeth about Macduff. Now, the fact that the apparition could symbolize Macbeth and the fact that the witches say to him, he already knows your thoughts, actually seems to indicate or to hint that the witches are only sort of mirroring Macbeth's anxieties and fears back to him. We already know that Macbeth has been afraid of Macduff for a while, and the witches don't sort of tell him, you don't need to worry about Macduff. He's like left. They say to him, beware Macduff. They sort of almost like add fuel to the flame. They make his paranoia and his anxiety and his fear worse by telling him this, by confirming what he's already thinking. So Macbeth says, whatever thou art, for thy good caution, thanks. Thou hast harped my fear aright. But one word more. So he's saying, you've confirmed my fears. He wants to ask more, but the first witch says, he will not be commanded. Yeah? Macbeth might get to order the witches around, but he cannot order the apparitions around. And the witches almost sort of put him back in his place a little bit. He cannot be commanded. Here's another more potent than the first. So where it says potent here actually means powerful. So here's another apparition, even more powerful than the first. Thunder. Second apparition, a bloody child. And this child could be, of course, there's dead children is definitely a sort of more subtle theme that recurs in the play. We have, of course, the implied death of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's child. We have Fleance, that was a child that Macbeth wanted to kill. But of course, we have Macduff's children that Macbeth will actually kill. And so this apparition could be a reference to a few of them. It could be a reference to any of them. But it's most probable that it's a reference to Macduff's murdered children. And that's only guessing based on what the apparition says. So the second apparition says again, Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. Yeah, if I had 3 ears, I'd be listening to you with all 3 of them. So the second apparition gives him this advice. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. To be bloody, be violent, be brave. If you're resolute, you're sort of determined, you stick to your guns. He's telling him, be violent, stick to what you want to do. They're encouraging him to not only be as violent as he wants, but also sort of follow his instincts. Like, they're telling him, be bold, like, don't be afraid what other people are going to say, do what you want. They're sort of encouraging him on this path of bloodshed and madness. They say to him, laugh to scorn the power of man. Yeah, you can laugh to dismiss the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. And what they tell him in essence is, you can laugh at the most powerful person, because nobody born from a woman will ever harm you. Now, at this point in the story, it does seem like they're telling Macbeth he's essentially invincible, right? But the audience kind of already knows, of course, that the witches are setting him up to fail. So we know that they could be misleading him, or they could be sort of lying or twisting words. And if we if we sort of combine this prophecy, which clearly refers to the fact that, and we'll find out later on, that Macduff was not, technically speaking, born, he was actually born from a cesarean section, then we could actually sort of make the connection with a bloody child. A bloody child, you know, a baby might be covered in blood if it was born from a cesarean section, and therefore the bloody child could not only represent Macduff's dead children, but Macduff himself, who will be the person to defy this prophecy from the witches and actually be the person that can harm Macbeth and kill him. So the apparition disappears, it descends. Macbeth says, then live Macduff. Then he says, then live Macduff. What need I fear of thee? Why would I need to fear you? Well, it's fine, you can live. But he doesn't stick to that. Straight away he says, but yet, I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. So he's thinking, well, I can allow Macduff to live because I don't need to fear him, since, you know, no one can defeat me. But then he's thinking, but I'd rather not let you live so that so that I can put my fears to rest. So I can sleep in spite of thunder. So again, we've got this language, this idea of sleep, of Macbeth just needing to sleep. And now he can't sleep out of fear and anxiety. So he's thinking, even if he knows that Macduff's not done anything wrong, or that Macduff can't sort of harm him, he's still planning to kill Macduff just for peace of mind. Or so he says. Of course, whether or not he's lying to himself is completely up to you as the reader, as the student, when you're writing about Macbeth. How much do you think he means what he's saying here? Is he actually doing this for peace of mind? Or is he sort of addicted to the violence? Is he sort of addicted to the power that it gives him? Finally, we get our third apparition. Thunder, third apparition, a child crowned with a tree in his hands. And so this child crown, a child wearing a crown, this is most likely symbolizing Malcolm. Malcolm is, of course, the child of Duncan and should rightfully have the crown, which Macbeth stole from him. But the tree that the child is holding, we won't understand what this means until later on, because Malcolm will actually be using trees for camouflage to disguise his approach to Macbeth's castle when he finally attacks him. So again, this is a sign and a symbol that we won't understand until later on, and that Macbeth will never sort of realize. He's being told all the information that he needs to know. He just doesn't know it yet. So Macbeth comments on this and he says, what is this that rises like the issue of a king? Yeah, what is this that stands as if it's, you know, the son of a king, and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty? So he's interested now because he's saying this child looks like the child of a king. It's wearing a crown on its head. Again, the witches remind him, listen, but speak not to it. Yet don't speak, just listen to what it has to say. The third apparition says, be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, and where conspirers are. So again, be lion mettle, have the mettle of a lion, the courage of a lion. So be brave, be proud, yeah, be arrogant. Don't worry about listening to others. Take no care who chafes, who frets, and where conspirers are. Don't worry about people that disapprove of you. Don't worry about people that are talking about you, that are doubting you. Don't worry about people that are conspiring against you. They're basically telling him, anyone that doubts you, anyone that works against you, you don't even need to worry about them. So again, filling him with this overconfidence. They say to him, Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. They're saying to him, listen, you don't have to worry about anyone disapproving of you or anyone planning to go against you, because you will never be vanquished. To be vanquished means to be sort of defeated in battle. So you'll never be defeated until the great Birnam Forest, until the trees of the forest come to Dunsinane Hill, where the castle is. So unless the trees physically move from Birnam Forest to the hill where the castle is, you'll never be defeated. And again, when you think about it at face value, this does sound like, well, trees can't actually uproot themselves and move, and therefore this is impossible. This means that Macbeth can't be defeated. It's certainly how Macbeth interprets it. The apparition descends and Macbeth says, that will never be, who can impress the forest, bid the tree, and fix his earthbound root. He's saying, well, there's nothing in this world that has the power to get trees to uproot themselves and start walking. Sweet bodements, yeah? Like sweet omen or sweet prophecy, good. Rebellion's head, rise, never till the wood of Birnam rise, and a high place to Macbeth shall live in the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. So he's saying, Macbeth, all I need to worry about now is just dying of basically natural causes. Unless Birnam Forest starts moving, I don't have to worry about whoever's rebelling against me. I don't have to worry about Malcolm or Macduff or anyone at all that might be conspiring against him, because the trees are never going to move. So now all he has to worry about is just living his life until he dies of whatever natural cause. But then he says, yet My heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me, if your art can tell so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? And yet, in spite of all these prophecies telling him, you're strong, you're invincible, you can't be beaten, you can't be killed, all of these prophecies telling him exactly what he wanted to hear, there's one thing that he's desperate to know about, and that's Banquo's prophecy about his sons being kings. So he's saying, will Banquo's issue, will Banquo's descendants, so his children, his children's children, will they ever rule in this kingdom? And the witches say to him, seek to know no more. Don't try to find out any more than you already have. He says, I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. And here at this point, he puts his foot down. He becomes forceful. He refuses point blank to leave. He says, I will be satisfied. You will give me an answer. You will be cursed if you deny me. Let me know. What sinks that cauldron, and what noise is this? Hautboys. And if you remember, hautboys is like the fanfare, the musical instruments that are played to announce a king. Yeah, we used to hear it with Duncan. So the first witch says show, second witch says show, third witch says show. All of them say, show his eyes and grieve his heart. Come like shadows, so depart. They summon this vision and they say, they call the vision forward like a shadow, and they tell the vision to disappear like a shadow. And they say to the vision, show his eyes, so show Macbeth and grieve his heart, and, make him feel the pain that he's going to feel in his heart. A show of 8 kings, the last with a glass in his hand. Here, glass in this context actually means mirror, not a glass as in a cup. So 8 ghosts, one of them has a mirror in his hands, and the ghost of Banquo is following. And Macbeth sort of describes what he sees. He says, thou art too like the spirit of Banquo, down, thy crown doth sear mine eyeballs. And he sees these spirits, and they look exactly like Banquo, and he sees that they're wearing crown, and he's saying, the sight of it sears my eyeballs, the sight of it burns his eyes. And thy hair, thou other gold-bound brow is like the first. And he's looking at all of the other, and he's seeing, so the second one also has a crown on its head. A third is like the former, and the third one also has a crown on his head. And he starts swearing at the witches, you filthy hags, why do you show me this? Even though he literally asked. A fourth, start eyes, what will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? He's saying, what is this line of king going to go on and on and on till the end of times? Another yet, a seventh, I'll see no more, and yet the 8th appears, who bears a glass which shows me many more. And there's 7 and then 8, and all of them have crowns, and all of them are part of Banquo's descendants. And then he's saying, I can't even look anymore. But then the 8th one has a mirror in his hands, and that mirror shows even more kings in the mirror. And some I see that twofold bowls and treble scepters carry, and some of them hold like scepters, and the bowl is that sort of, there's a proper name for it, which escapes me, and I'll add it to the comments if I remember it. And so they're carrying these symbols of royalty. And some I see that twofold bowls and treble scepters carry. Horrible sight. Yeah, this sight to him is horrifying. It confirms everything that he feared. Now I see 'tis true, for the blood-bolted Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. And now he can tell that the prophecy that the witches gave Banquo is true. Banquo's descendants will be kings, because he's pointing at these kings and he's smiling as if he's saying, yes, they're mine. They're my descendants. They'll be king, not yours. The apparitions vanish. All the kings and Banquo's ghosts, they all disappear. Macbeth says, what? Is it so? So that's it? The first witch says, aye, sir, all this is so. But why stands Macbeth thus amazedly? But why do you stand here so shocked? Come, sisters, cheer we up his sprites. Let's cheer up his spirits. Let's put him in a good mood and show the best of our delights. I'll charm the air to give a sound while you perform your antique round, that this great king may kindly say, our duties did his welcome pay. And they're talking about putting on music to cheer him up, and they'll do a dance because, after all, why shouldn't be Macbeth thankful? They answered all the questions he asked. They gave him everything that he wanted, so why shouldn't he be happy with them? And it's almost like they're sort of rubbing it in, like playing music and dancing when he is so miserable. when they're literally orchestrating his defeat and his downfall. Music, the witches dance and then vanish with Hecate. Now, of course, Hecate had already left the scene, so it's the witches really that are vanishing. Macbeth says, "Where are they? Gone? Let these pernicious hours stand. I accursed in the calendar. Come in without there." So here he's saying pernicious is a word that means sort of harmful or evil. So let this harmful, damaging hour stand accursed in the calendar. Even though he's received all these prophecies telling him, you know, you're invincible, you're powerful, you'll be fine, do what you want, he's still miserable because the greatest insecurity he had, the thing that hurts him the most, the fact that he's done all of this for literally nothing, for Banquo's heirs, Banquo's heirs and descendants, not his. That's the thing that was sort of hurting him the most, and that's the thing that the witches also confirmed. So he says, "Come in without there. Whoever's outside, come in." Enter Lennox. "What's your grace's will?" "So you're the weird sisters?" "No, my lord," says Lennox. Macbeth says, "Came they not by you?" "No, indeed, my lord." So Macbeth says, "Oh, did you see the sisters leave?" And Lennox says, "No." And he tries to confirm it. And of course, this tells us that if they didn't leave past Lennox, the witches definitely did vanish. So they are genuine supernatural beings. Macbeth says, "Infected be the air whereon they ride." Yeah, the air on which they fly is infected. "And damned all that trust them." And that's really interesting and a little bit tragic, because he's saying all those that trust witches are damned. And if you're damned, you're sort of cursed, or you're damned to go to hell. And this is implying that he's sort of aware almost of the fact that he's going to hell because he trusts them, because he listens to them. And also there's a sense of like maybe a sort of subconscious awareness as well, that they're sort of leading him astray, that they're leading him to his doom. Maybe he kind of senses that, part of him senses that. He says, "I did hear the galloping of horse. Who was it came by? But I heard someone coming on a horse. Who was it?" Lennox says, "'Tis 2 or 3, my lord, that bring you word Macduff is fled to England." So Lennox is saying, well, there's a couple of messengers that have arrived to let you know that Macduff has run away to England. Macbeth says, "Fled to England? Aye, my good lord. Time, thou anticipatest my dread exploits. The flighty purpose never is overtook, unless the deed go with it." So he's saying it's almost as if time anticipated what he was going to do. It's almost as if time knew that he was going to have Macduff killed, and so gave Macduff the opportunity to run away. And so what he's saying here is when he says the flighty purpose never is overtook unless the deed go with it, he's saying the purpose, meaning to do something, doesn't get it done. It's actually getting it done that works. He's saying there's no point in thinking about doing stuff. You have to do it straight away. He sees it as basically that the fact that he wanted to kill Macduff, but it's too late now, Macduff has run away. He sees it as a sign of, I need to start acting quicker on my impulses. He says, "From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand." From here on out, the first thing that I feel in my heart will be the first thing that I do with my hand. Yeah, he's deciding I'm not going to be thinking and debating and questioning what I want to do. As soon as I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And of course, this sort of impulsive behavior from a king is a really, really bad sign. It's definitely a sign of a tyrant, and also a sign of his madness. But there's almost like a desperation to Macbeth, where he's just desperate for control and power at this point, because things are sort of very much escalating really quickly. He's really lost control over his kingdom and his people and the lords. And he's seeing this happen, and he's sort of desperate to kind of get it all back. He says, "And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done." And I'm going to start right now. So this idea of thinking something and doing it straight away is going to start right now. And he says this: "The castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife. Give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line." And his first order, the first thing that he does, take Macduff's castle. So to surprise a castle is like to sort of attack a castle and seize it and take it. Seize upon Fife, take his castle, take his land. Give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. And execute his wife, his children, and any person that's related to him. And this is, of course, the sort of a sign of the escalation of Macbeth's violence. We've seen him start off with Duncan, reluctantly murdering Duncan. He didn't want to do it, and he clearly hated it, and it deeply affected him. And then he killed, or had killed, Banquo and his son, and he felt a little less bad about it. He saw the ghost, and it made him more angry than anything. And now, just like that, with the snap of a finger, he has an entire, all of Macduff's family, his children, you know, his wife, people that have absolutely nothing to do with it. At least with Fleance, there was the idea that it couldn't be avoided. He might have thought he couldn't avoid killing Fleance if he wanted to stop the prophecy from coming true. But here there isn't really a good reasoning for him killing Macduff's wife and children. He just does it because it's the first thing he thinks to do, and he's decided not to question himself anymore. So have his whole family killed. No boasting like a fool. The deed I'll do before this purpose call, yeah? I'm not going to boast. I'm not going to be like an idiot and talk about all the things I'm going to do. I'm actually going to do this straight away before I can think better of it. But no more sights. Where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are. And now it's time for him to go speak to the messengers to kind of question them about what's happened with Macduff. And that's it. In the next scene, we are going to see his order sort of being executed, and we're going to find out what happens to Macduff, Macduff's family, and then the scene after that, we will actually be going with to join Macduff and Malcolm, where they are in England. And so these will be the next two videos that we do. I hope that this was useful. As usual, if you'd like to get hold of the annotations, please feel free to get in touch with us through our Facebook page if you'd like. If you have any questions about anything I've mentioned today, any of the quotations, the scene, any of the characters, events, anything to do really with exam preparation, revision, assessment objectives, essay writing, anything at all, please feel free to ask in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. If you have suggestions for other videos or feedback that you might have for the videos that we're currently doing, we do read all of the comments, and we listen to feedback as best we can. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see you all in the next video.